Hey, James, we keep talking about having political royalty on this week. Nancy Pelosi, Roy Cooper. Man, we're in a run because once again we got political royalty. Mitch Landrieu, as you know, former lieutenant governor of your state, mayor of New Orleans, and now the co-chair of the Harris-Walz Committee, and maybe the best politician in the world. But anyway,
well,
Mitch Landrieu.
James trained me, whatever the hell I am. James trained me.
It is terrific to have you. First 3 nights of this convention, what have you gotten out of it? Anything you've missed?
Well, nobody can see all of it. You know, it's too mammoth, and you're not watching it at home. I mean, just in the building, it just feels euphoric. People are happy as they can be. Now, remember, been campaigning for President Biden since, I think, February. I left the White House in December, and after doing all the infrastructure stuff, and I was on the campaign trail, and it was hard. You know, it was tough. It was really, everybody was like minute to minute, and then of course the debate performance happened, and then he had COVID, and then, you know, the subsequent movement within the party, and then he did something that I don't think we know a politician that's done what he's done before, which is to voluntarily give up the power of the presidency, which, as you know, is the most powerful office in the world, and juxtaposed to Donald Trump, who even after he lost, he wouldn't give it up. I think was a cathartic thing for the country, and the vice president stepped into this apparently seamlessly. I say that apparently because nothing's ever seamless, but because of all the incredible work that had been done, understanding the fundamentals, making sure that you had offices in the state, making sure good people were hired, making sure that you knew that you had to win everything. You had to win it on the air. You had to win it digitally. You had to win it hand to hand. We had this organizational structure, and then she stepped up, and then I think anybody would admit the last 31 days has been the most extraordinary 31 days in our political lives. You've never seen anything like it. They kind of allude to 2008. This is even bigger and more robust. And so we are riding, I don't want to call it a sugar high because I'm not sure that it is that, but we're riding a level of joy, enthusiasm, and really a cathartic, I feel like there's this cathartic thing going on in the country where people are going, wait a minute, we actually could get past Trump. And even conservatives are starting to say, and this is what I think was helpful, to have all the Republicans on the stage. Jeff Duncan was on the stage, Kinzinger. All these folks are saying, listen, this is not the Republican Party. And so all the Republicans out there who are living in the suburban areas or wherever they are, that were maybe Reagan voters or they were Bush voters, they are now starting to see the distance between what we now call MAGA Republicans and them. So let's just call the MAGA Republicans 35 to 36%, maybe there's 12 to 15 in the middle. These folks, maybe people call them Nikki Haley voters, however they self-identify, are actually starting to see that the Democratic Party is starting to become a bigger tent party than it has been, for example, in the last 8 years. And so that's important to say, but I'm mindful, like James is, it very close election. We're pushing a rock up a hill. We're still behind. It's going to come down to 3 states. I think Coach said it exactly right last night. You know, this is a football game. It's the 4th quarter. It's the 2 seconds left in the game. You know, we're on the 2-yard line and it's 4th down. I mean, that's kind of where the country is right now. And so I'm excited to see.
And you hope she's Patrick Mahomes.
And you hope, well, you know, we'll see. I mean, listen, I think when and I'll say this with the greatest respect for her, you know that they knocked her for years about not being up to it.
Right.
And that was the drag on her. It was wrong, by the way, because I traveled around the country with her, and you can see that as a politician, just a straight up politician, whether she ran a good campaign before or not, that she has, in the last 31 days, demonstrated the kind of thoroughbred mentality that racehorses that win all the time, you know, have shown. And so, you know, she's got to perform now.
What do you expect from her tonight? What should she do tonight? Lay out her vision for the future, lay out her program, tell about herself. I mean, what's the most important thing she can do in that acceptance?
Well, I think one of the benefits that she has is that, and one of the challenges is that not that many people, amazingly, know who she is. Now it's like telling a guy or a gal that just got a movie who just became famous. He said, "Yeah, it took me 30 years to become famous overnight." So Kamala Harris has an incredible resume that people don't know about. I mean, people generally like folks that were district attorneys that put the bad guys away and fought sexual abusers. She was one of those people. She ran for office, she got elected, she managed an office, she prosecuted herself. She was the one prosecuting cases. Then she runs for attorney general. Now people go, attorney general, in Louisiana there are only 4.6 million people, all right? But in California, California's bigger than most countries, so she literally ran the biggest law office in America. And when she was doing that, she went after bank frauds, and she went after transnational gangs. People generally like people who did that. It's a good calling card when you run for office. Then, of course, she became a United States Senator, and her record is clear there, and she became the vice president. So you ask just on merit, you know, she's getting elected, it's historic, she could be the first black woman. You say, yeah, that's nice, and that's great, but that's a little gravy. The fact of the matter is, she is much more competent and has more years of experience than both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And I think that she has to use this opportunity to introduce her biography to them on the competent side. She's got a great historic bio. You know, she talks about being a girl from Oakland and hooking up with a guy from Nebraska, and both of them together as partners, now, you know, living the American dream. That's a great story that a lot of people can bleed into. But what they don't know about her is how incredibly accomplished she is and competent. And I think she's going to use tonight to tell the story. Then she's got to talk about what she's going to do, because campaigns are about the future. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're seeing that she's starting to lay that out.
What is that? I mean, do you lay that out programmatically? Do you lay that out as a matter of values? Do you lay that out as a contrast to Trump? Or
this is my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of the campaign on this notion, but I think that you're starting to see in the rhetorical change. When Biden was running, it was democracy and other stuff. Now it's freedom, it's opportunity, and cost. And she can speak to this very forcefully, because when the issue about women's reproductive rights is on its own one of the most powerful issues. Women across the political spectrum, they may not say this in front of their husbands who are MAGA guys, but women do not want to be controlled. And they certainly don't want their reproductive decisions being controlled by Ken Paxton from Texas, or these other folks who have basically said to them that if you return it to the states, we're actually going to penalize you. We are going to put you in jail. There aren't going to be exceptions to rape, incest, life of the mother. We are going to be in your hospital room when you and your husband are making that incredible decision about whether or not to terminate a pregnancy. And women are like, you know what, that's a bridge too far. We never really thought that if y'all were going to reverse Roe, and we never, honestly, I think a lot of the pro-life movement really never thought past, well, if they did it, what would you actually do? But that's now coming into full view. And I think people are well, if all the referendums around the country or any indication in Kansas and in other places, people are going, look, not a shot, we're not doing that. So that's very powerful, but it fits under the freedom agenda. But so does the Voting Rights Act. So you have women, and then you have the African American community and people that care about that, and so is who you love and who you want to marry. And so is, by the way, reading for books. So now what's happening is this has gotten to be a really clear race about what they have been trying to do, which is to essentially control everybody in America for people's personal financial interests. And I think that resonates across the country, and I think it's going to be very powerful in places where you can access some votes.
James.
So, Mayor, we hear talk of bipartisan infrastructure bill, infrastructure, and it just kind of goes into the ether. Tell us, because this was your job in the White House, tell us a couple of three things about this infrastructure improvements we're making, and why is this going to really impact people at a very real way?
Well, two things. Just as I'm a little defensive about this because I was the infrastructure coordinator, czar, and our job was really three things. We had to rebuild how the federal government built stuff. And the federal government, states government, local governments were not working together. So we had back of the house stuff that we had to do. I call it building the mousetrap, building scaffolding, the kind of things that people don't see when contractors are working on, building a foundation. We had to spend a lot of time doing that. But then we historically have gotten, I don't know, this $500 billion has been pushed out the door. The federal sector's put in $1 trillion. The outcome of that is that we actually have 60,000 plus projects that are in building right now. And those things are slow to come out the ground. People expected, I don't know, I think wrongly, that all of that stuff would get done and it would be built in 2 years and then we can move on to something else, when you're rebuilding the foundation of the country. And so right now we are in the midst of, and there is dirt turning, and there are people working on sites, there are welders, there are carpenters, If you're talking about Amtrak, there are folks that are rebuilding the train sets. And what's beginning to happen now, and people are beginning to see their neighbors who are actually the ones that are doing the work. So I told the story a little bit earlier today about a guy, I think his name's Sean Diamante. Sean, forgive me if I mispronounced your name. But he was an Amtrak worker, and we had gone to break ground on a train station in Pennsylvania. And he was at that thing, and he started crying, and he said, man, this is going to, my father was an Amtrak worker, I'm an Amtrak worker, now my son is going to get, so this idea of pride and restoring things that had been lost. If you go into burnt out communities and now they're building an electric vehicle plant where it was burnt out and they got left behind, they're now beginning to see, oh wow, somebody's coming back to get me. If you go to Culpeper, Virginia, I remember this woman, she stood up in a meeting and she said, I don't understand what y'all are talking about this broadband stuff. I said, well, it's high-speed internet. She said, well, why don't the hell y'all just say that? I understand that. She says, well, by the way, she said, I know y'all keep telling me y'all going to get me high-speed internet, but my farm is 200 yards off the road, and the company is not getting the high-speed internet to me, and as a result of that, I can't run my farm. I can't engage in precision agriculture. And oh, by the way, if my husband has a heart attack and I need somebody to get here, I can't do telemedicine. I said, ma'am, the president and the vice president are going to get high-speed internet to your house. And we actually did that. And so now she's going to be able to say, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden said X, and they actually delivered. Or are they going to be we know, the names are Aiden and Jaden, they're from Milwaukee. They were at the State of the Union address. They lived in a house where they were sucking dirty water that was poisonous out of lead pipes. We actually changed the pipes in that house, and those kids are happy. And again, when I was in Phoenix right now, we are manufacturing chips in the United States of America again. They used to be manufactured, they are being manufactured in Taiwan, but when COVID hit and we figured out, hey man, we're kind of vulnerable here because if anything happens to Taiwan, we're not going to be able to do our business. You can't run your refrigerator, you can't run your washing machine, you can't run your phone. We got to start making those things here. Right now, in Phoenix, there's a thing called a fab, which is just a big manufacturing center. It's got to get built. There are 3 young girls from the Navajo Nation that learn how to weld, that are getting paid substantial money now, that have daycare, and they're buying their first house. And they're sitting there going, I never thought that this would be possible. So the idea that we had, that Joe Biden had and Kamala Harris, is that we're going to invest in the American people. We actually have the receipts. But we got to do a better job of telling those particular stories. And I just, we thought about this earlier. You can get free media if you can get the press to pay attention to you, but they yawn about that, or you can get paid media. And I think that you're going to see a lot of commercials that are penetrating with real voices of real people saying, the Democratic Party is not going to leave me behind.
So, turn right back to Albert, I want to take one specific piece of infrastructure that you are very familiar with, and that's what we call MSY. That's the airport code for New Orleans.
Yeah.
You couldn't find a list of the 5 worst airports in America some time ago that New Orleans wasn't. Now you can't find a list of the 5 best airports in America that New Orleans is not on. So if this was done as a result of you and your administration, how long did it take from having the idea, I'm going to do something about this goddamn airport, to a passenger actually going in there and getting on a plane?
It was 6.5 years,
Okay.
about, which I think is too long. I'm the most impatient, and that's like one of the fastest projects in the country. It is literally the biggest infrastructure project in Louisiana's history. And when I walked into the mayor's office, the city had for 30 years talked about doing it, but they couldn't figure out how to get it done. Just like the World Trade Center down by the river, they talked about putting that back into commerce. And I said, look, I'm gonna figure out a way to just bang through the bureaucracy and make this happen. So we started rebuilding the airport, and instead of trying to find a new site, a new location, we figured out that we could just put it on the same exact site that it was in, but really just kind of across the pasture, if you will. And we started building this thing, and it wound up costing us about $1.2 billion. It originally started off at $800, and people said, wow, you went over budget. No, what wound up happening is we were doing such a good job of bringing people into the city. The growth in the city demanded that we expand the airport before we finished the first one. So that airport, but it took it, again, let me just be clear about this. We did it fast, we did it on time, we did it on budget, but it still took too long. And as the infrastructure coordinator for the president, we spent a lot of time behind the scenes trying to make sure that it's easier and faster to build big things. And we want to do that without shirking the values that are important to us. You don't want to overrun African American neighborhoods. You don't want to be on territorial lands. You don't want to do things that the community is not interested in. And the truth of the matter is, when you run towards that and you ask people for help and you ask them for their permission, it takes you less time because they don't sue you and the courts don't hold you up. But let me just tell you, we can see now we've invested in airports, we've invested in ports, we've invested in waterways. I'll give you a good point. The governor of Louisiana, of a red state, a guy named Jeff Landrieu, and all of the delegation, except for one Republican and one congressman, voted against the bill. They voted against the bipartisan infrastructure law, which, as you know, includes money to make sure that every person in America has access to high-speed internet. They voted against it. They yelled against it. They ragged against it. They blamed it. Yesterday, the governor put out a press release saying, after Joe Biden gave him $1.2 billion, that he's bringing high-speed internet to Louisiana, and didn't bother to say, thank you, Joe Biden.
So, Ian, I think the eye came within 10 miles of the New Orleans airport, okay? The remnants of the storm got to Newark, EWR. Newark had to close for 3 days, and we were accepting flights immediately after the storm.
Correct.
That's infrastructure.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it really matters to people. And the country is being rebuilt in the midst of people's eyes right now as we speak. It's going to be something they'll look back on and go, man, that was a pivotal moment in the history of the country. This is as big as stuff that was done, back in the Roosevelt days or back in the Eisenhower days, or the electrification of America. Whether or not it's politically salient in a 2.5 year or 3 year cycle, I think it's going to help some, but it is not it's not as easy as, talking about something as emotional and immediately necessary for people like reproductive rights, or the cost of groceries when you go to the store every day, which everybody feels. And I think that issue is really pushing people, to think about stuff harder than they had before.
Well, I'm going to pick up on that because in the spirit of Coach Walls, I think for the first 3 days you've played great offense. I mean, you've made the case. It's been tough against Trump. I'm not sure you really played great defense. You mentioned earlier her ill-fated campaign earlier. That's what Trump is going to go after. He's going to say you're going to be sending rapists and murderers across the board. You've got an economy where people can't afford, the cost of living is out of control, in addition to the racial attacks. At some point you have to address some of this stuff harder, don't you?
Well, there's no question that a game is an offense and defense. And let me just say this. I know that many people who listen were wondering, where was the Democratic bench, some years ago? And now, James has pointed this out, our bench is like really deep. And the one thing this convention has done is shown people who those new young voices are. And I tell you what, it's a great bench. And every night you looked at it, whether it's Bashir or whether it's Pete or whether, it's Wes Moore, who did a fantastic job last night, or Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer, who's going to be there tonight. The run of governors that we have, J.B. Pritzker, that have actually delivered for the American people and let people know that government in partnership with the private sector can really make things happen, and that we can talk about values and that we can talk about hard stuff. I think that's going to be one of the bigger, longer takeaways from this campaign. Secondly, I believe that we're going to win, but I also believe that we're building infrastructure around the country so that map gets expanded in the future. I think that's important. But on the defensive side, I think that one of the things that surprised people was how aggressively the vice president has come out on the issue of immigration and on the issue of crime. She says, you want to talk about crime? I'll talk about it. Let's look at the numbers. Crime has actually gone down in the last 4 years. When Donald Trump, crime went up. That is just a fact. And talking about it in a very aggressive way. And oh, by the way, the guy who's a criminal who is talking about this with a woman who is a prosecutor. And that's why when they say it's Kamala for the people, right? And that's going to be very, very powerful. And she's going to prosecute this case against him personally, but she also can speak very eloquently and forcefully to the idea that you can be tough on crime and you can be smart on crime. You can be two things at once, as I like to say my little thing. Donald Trump's confused about Kamala. Is she Indian or is she black? And I'm like, in America, you can be Indian and black. You can be Irish and you can be Italian, or you can be ignorant and arrogant. like Donald
Well,
Trump
he
is.
fits that bill.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so she's going to prosecute the case. On the other thing, on immigration, she's not backing up from immigration. She goes, listen, you want an immigration plan? Call you fellas in the Senate and tell them to vote for the bill. You're the one who stopped it. You're the reason that the border is open. We have fewer border crossings now than we did before. And I think that we're going to go on the offense on that issue as well. And anything else he wants to talk about. If he wants to talk about cost, everybody knows that because of COVID and because of Putin's war in the Ukraine, costs went up. We started working hard. They went up all over the world. Inflation went up all over the world. We cured it faster than any place in the world. It went down from 9% to now 3%, and it's lower. The feds are about to increase their rates. We created 16 million jobs. Fed's going to cut the rates. Thank you. We created 16 million jobs. Every economist of note, every one of them, I think, said there's no way that you can do this without going into a recession. And Joe Biden said that's insane. We don't, in order to avoid a recession, we don't have to lay people off and cut their wages. He said, I'm in favor of giving people jobs and raising their wages. And Joe Biden said, I think we can have a soft landing. If you let me invest this money in infrastructure and in chips and get this money into the economy, and we do it in the right way, we can actually have a recession-free recovery, which miraculously has never been done in the history of the country, which we have succeeded at 100%. And every one of the economists said that we were wrong. And Joe Biden turned out to be right about that.
Don't forget price gouging. Okay, there
Right,
was people that were taking advantage
I'm sorry.
of this.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
The other reason why we had it was because, and this is just true, and my wife told me this the other day. She goes, Mitch, I don't need an economist to tell me that these folks that are putting these groceries on the shelves that I go get every day for our grandbaby when she comes home are price gouging. And somebody in the conversation said, well, you don't have any proof. She goes, I see it every day. She goes, these prices go up, they don't come back down. I know the cost of things are going down. Somebody's getting the money. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know, somebody spoke about the number this morning, that profits went up 75%, you know, and somebody is taking that money, went up much higher than inflation went up. And so you see this with oil companies, you see it with them. And let me just say this, you know, going after price gouging is not like a novel idea. If you live in a hurricane zone and a hurricane comes and it knocks out the electricity, I'm the mayor, I got to go get the electricity back on. I know that I got 72 hours to make that happen, and my citizens are going to be in trouble. But they get in more trouble when the gas station or the grocery store starts jacking up prices really high, and every attorney general in this country goes on TV and says, if you do that and take advantage of people when they're in harm's way, we're going to come after you. And that's all Kamala Harris is saying. Because as Bobby Casey is saying in Pennsylvania, it's provably true that this is a problem, and Kamala Harris is going to go after them and fight for them to make sure that their costs are lower, including fighting to get prescription drugs lower and fighting Big Pharma. You can't explain why you pay more for a pill in the United States and less for the same pill in Canada, and American citizens getting screwed. Why are you charging us so much money for insulin? All of those things we're fighting about, and then we go on defense and say, but they're coming for your affordable health care. They're coming after Social Security. They're coming after Medicare, Medicaid. They're going to impose a federal ban on abortion. All of those things resonate to people in the country.
James, you got a final question for the...
Well, man, I guess a question that I would have for anything, what do you hope, you know, that the country knows after the Vice President speaks tonight that they didn't know before she spoke?
Well, first of all, I hope they think they know her better. And I hope they like what they now know. I hope they see the person who's strong, the person who's competent, the person who is the most qualified to be in the race, and the person that's going to give them the best opportunity for they and their family in the future. And because I think this race, it is about policy, but actually I think it's about value and character. And I think that she's not only a vote positively for the future, but they also hopefully will remember, and we have to remind them that Donald Trump is the greatest threat to what we believe America is supposed to be in our lifetime. And it's a serious threat because even though when his lips are moving, he's lying, he has been clear that when he says he's going to do something, he really means it. And so if he says that he's going to put the military on the ground to hurt American citizens who decide for some reason to protest about an issue that he disagrees with, he means that. That's one of the most dangerous ideas that we've heard in our lifetime. The ideas that generals have come out and say, if you do that, you have now crossed the Rubicon and you cannot go back. So I think you got the positive message that's going to come out, but you can't ever let people know that the wolf is at the door of democracy and his name is Donald Trump. And somebody has to prosecute the case against him and beat him, and Kamala Harris is going to stand up to him just like she stood up against all the bullies, her entire life.
And that oversimplified, cliche journalistic question, if you could pick a key to winning this election other than getting more votes, what would it be, Mitch?
I just think authenticity. I think that's what this, at the end of the day, if she is who she says he is and Mike is, Tim who is who he says he is, and people go, wow, that is the American dream. They are America, and I trust both of them. And now that I know, not just like them, but I understand who they are and the experience that they have, a guy, as you know, that was a coach, a guy, as you know, that was in the National Guard and served in the military, a guy that was a congressman and a governor, right? And he's got the same heart, and he's with this person who has the credentials that we talked about. I feel comfortable that they're going to protect my future, make me safe, lower my cost, and make the world a better place, and stop somebody bad from making everything much worse for us. I think that that's a winning formula. But to end this, I'll end this where James ends it all the time, is that this is about numbers. This isn't about, people showing up at rallies. It's about getting the right votes in the right place at the right time, when we need it the most. And I think it's going to be close, it's going to be hard, and it's going to require everybody hands on deck until the polls close in every state in the country.
You said 3 states. I count 7. What am I?
Well, there are 7, and they're all important, and if we can expand the map, we can do that. But I think Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania could be the ball game. Now, there's some other states that we have opportunities in, and we should go everywhere and do everything, but don't take your eye off of where the necessary hit is. And that's where the necessary hit is, in those 3 particular states.
And I just want to add one thing, Nebraska too. In order to get to 270, we have to carry all the states, not including Georgia, Nevada, or Arizona. But if we carry those 3 in Nebraska too, we hit the number. I'm more aspirational than that, but that's exactly where we're.
Roy Cooper told us yesterday he thinks you're going to carry North Carolina.
Well, listen, it would be. I think we can and we should. Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, all very, very important, as are all the states in the nation. But if you're really just kind of in the business of winning and counting votes, all of those things are critically important and true. But you can't do it if you don't do Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and then Nebraska.
The way we say it in New Orleans is Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, everything else is lagniappe.
We'll spell it for y'all if y'all don't have that.
Okay.
Thank y'all so much.
You were terrific. Thank you so much.